Hi guys, it's Kelly and I am back with a new video today. I know it's been a minute. I'm sorry. Some things going on in my regular life and I just didn't have time to do it. So this video, as you saw in the intro, is actually for Newton's Nook. I'm guest designing for them this month and I really love the owners and I love their images, and so I'm super excited about that opportunity. I chose to work with this stamp set. It's called A Cozy Day In, and you know, she's just chilling with her book and her little kitty cats, and it's totally adorable. And then the other stamp set I chose is called Lovely Blooms. You can see here that I am making a mask. However, normally I would use Eclipse masking paper, but my son seems to have disappeared with my roll of Eclipse masking paper, and so I'm kind of faking it. So I have two pieces of the Scotch 3M masking tape, and I just butted them right up against each other, and I'm actually adhering them together with a piece of Scotch tape. While this might not be the fanciest way to do it, it is efficient. It works. So I just trimmed it out and I'm putting that down because I am going to be making a one-layer card today. This is that post-it masking tape I was talking about. I'm going to use a secondary piece of that to kind of create my little scene here. So I'm going to put this down to create just like a carpeted area, and then mask off the wall. So for the carpeted area, I'm going to be using antique linen distress oxide. This is actually the color of the carpet in my house, so kind of how I was led to pick that. I just think it's a really pretty neutral. And then I flipped the mask around to put wilted violet on the top, which is not a color in my house, but it should be because it's beautiful. While I have this all masked, I'm going to go in with the rose. It's the larger rose from the Lovely Bloom set, and I am doing first, second, third, fourth generation stamping. Basically, I'm inking it up and then I'm stamping it down to create like a wallpaper pattern, but then I'm stamping it multiple times since it fades off to the right-hand side. I want those impressions to be lighter, and that's why I'm stamping so many times after I've inked. And because the Distress Oxide has that pigment quality to it, it works really well for this. So I could just keep stamping, and I know it's hard to see on camera, but in real life, it does get lighter as it goes to the right. I'm gonna remove my masks now, and you can see the Scotch tape that's holding it together, but man, that thing held up. It totally worked. So I'm going to use a T-square ruler and a Copic safe writing pen because I'm going to be doing some Copic coloring, and I'm just going to draw two lines here to give myself like a baseboard. When doing these types of like mini scenes, if you will, I have noticed that this is something, a little added detail that really helps to make it feel like a full scene, is just by adding those two little lines. Pulled out my favorite combination of browns. I feel like this plays really well with that antique linen, and I just happen to like it. The 50 family for the ease is my favorite. So because of the way that I have done the Distress Oxide where it fades off to the right, it looks like I have a pretty strong light source coming from that side of my card. So that's how I'm coloring pretty much everything. So I'm using, I'm adding the shading with some darker colors, but then I'm using those darker colors to add just kind of a few little lines of color to give the impression of some wood grain. Nothing, I guess, really terribly specific. It really is just a bunch of lines, guys, because you're not even going to be paying attention to that part. I wanted to add some texture to the carpet. This turned out to be probably not even something I should have done, but I'm just doing really, really loose. Like the tip of, when I say loose, the tip of my pen is barely touching the paper. I am drawing them very close together, so that is probably more tight. I'm getting looser with the scribbles as I move to the right-hand side. So I started with an E53, and then I realized I needed to go just a little bit lighter where the light, the quote-unquote light, is hitting the carpet on the right-hand side there. So I did switch over to the E50. I decided to add a pretty strong shadow in here, so this is why it's almost just completely pointless. But if you don't add a strong shadow and you want to know how to add texture to some carpet, you can do what I just did and then not cover it up. So because the light source is in that top right hand corner, my the shadow is going to be down to the bottom left. I don't even know why I couldn't think of shadow, but whatever. It's going to be down to the bottom left, so it's going to touch my chair. Because of the way that the light is, it's not floating up above, like the chair isn't floating up above the ground, it's all touching, so it's going to come directly off the chair. I didn't pay too much attention to like the shape of the chair. It didn't really seem like it was going to be necessary because that shadow would be so large and there's no way that it would all fit on my card. I could just do a very general shadow and it still looked fine. I'm going to continue using these E50 markers. One, because I'm lazy and I don't want to pull out a bunch of markers. Two, because just by coloring them with different intensities, adding more of the darker or more of the lighter, you can really change the way that they look without having to get out a whole new family, or if you don't own them already, purchase anything new. So the way I'm coloring her hair is I'm adding shading to the part, and I'm adding shading where it's behind her book. I'm being a little bit lighter handed on the right hand side where she'll have a highlight in the lightest part, but I'm really just using the tip of my marker. I'm using light flicking motions. With hair, you typically want to make sure that you don't over blend. It looks better being a little bit streaky with those flicks of color. I'm going to use the same again, just carrying those throughout so I didn't have to pull out new markers. For the kitty cats here, I'm going to color them both with the same set of markers. I'm just starting with different ones. So for this cat, I filled them in completely with the E53, and then I'm just adding shading where things would be darker. So his belly will be darker because he's curled up on himself. And then on his left-hand side, his little tushy and where his tail's tucked under, that'll definitely be darker. Where his head is sitting on his paws, that will be darker. There are a couple of paws that or one paw that's drawn as if it's in front of his face, so that one will be lighter. Just basically everything's going to be to the bottom left. I did carry up some of the shading onto his back. I was careful not to hit the very top of his back because I feel like that would be the lightest, as well as the top of his head. And for my darkest color, I really only added it where it would be the very darkest. So right underneath his little booty where his tail is, and then the inside of his belly, and just a couple of spots on his paws. When I go through, I'd like to start lightest, move out to my darkest, darkest back into my lightest. But on the second round is where I really start moving out the color so that the highlight is the lightest color, and then my mid-tones are the ones that you're going to see the most of. For, like I said, this one, the lightest color was the E53, and just because, like, I wanted them to appear to be two different colors, even though I didn't get out new markers. So for this one, I'm filling him in with the E50, and then I'm going to add the E53 and E55 will be my mid-tone, and the 57 will be my darkest. So it's still within the same color family and markers that I had already pulled out, and then the cats will look different. I colored the top cat the same way I did the bottom. I figured I would spare you because there's a lot of little elements to color in here. I'm going to do her skin tone next. This is my kind of my go-to combination. It can appear to be a little dark. It can look a little overwhelming with that E04 being the darkest color, but it really does blend back. So I am adding shading. Her hair is sitting over her face, so she's going to have a cast shadow there, and then because her face is behind the book, there's going to be a shadow there. I try to be really light-handed and add shading, even though those little fingers are so tiny. I try to add shading in between them. If you are not confident in your ability to make a line that small, you can skip that part and then just add shading to like the outside and maybe bottom of her hands, I would probably do. But you'll be surprised how much that E04 really blends out once you put the E11 on top of it. So even if you've never tried it before, if you have the markers, then go ahead and try it and see how you like it. I'm using the E00 as my lightest color on the hand on the left, and the E50 as my lightest color on her face and the hand on the right. Again, just because I have that strong light source on the right hand side, I feel like those things would be lighter. I added a little bit of pink to the cheeks you can barely see, with an R02. I also use that to color in the kitty cat's noses and their ears. I wanted to blend that out a little bit in their ears, so I also pulled out an RV00, and I did blend it out on her cheeks just a little bit. So when I was sitting here trying to come up with my color combination, which I never pre-plan any of my cards as far as like the color combos, I do, if I have like a floral image, I do tend to stamp those out just because I'm not confident in my ability to build a floral bouquet that's well balanced on the fly. But so I was like, what's going to go with purple? And I'm a really big fan of like navy and purple, but then I wanted something else that would be different. And then, so orange or yellow is purple's complementary color, but I didn't really want to do that. So I settled on this yellow-green color. And I think I like it. I think it came out good. So I colored the top of the chair with a slight like lip on the left and right hand sides. And I did this because I wanted the chair to look like it was inset so that the edges of the chair were sticking out and would catch some of that light. I am adding shading underneath the cat up here. I'm also adding shading to each one of those little, what are they? It's like where it's like puckered in with the buttons. I added shading to all those little lines. And I'm just going to work out to that darkest color. Also, we're like 12 minutes into this video, and I should probably acknowledge that I sound like a 90-year-old woman who smoked 200 pack of cigarettes and then maybe snacked on some broken glass. I went out with my husband and my sister, brother-in-law, and some friends, and we went to a concert this evening. So I was singing poorly, but very loudly, for basically 2 hours straight. So well worth it. Sorry you have to listen to this. You may not think it's worth it, but I totally did. We went and saw Breaking Benjamin, and it's the 3rd time that we've seen them in concert. They always put on an excellent show. So it was just a super good time, but that usually means the next day I'm pretty voiceless. So anyway, now we're out to the darkest color for this one. I'm not going to put it necessarily everywhere, and the parts that I do put it is going to be very limited. It's maybe just going to be a line. You can see when I'm doing the chair arm there that I'm adding a little bit of darkness to each side of the arm, and I'm also adding it just around the front of the arm because I want that to look 3D. I want it to look set back. So I did add it to all of the lines on the chair. I feel like it needs that darkness to really make those buttons look like they're inset. So just working back out to the lightest color now. I'm adding, just like I told you before with the cat, this is really the point where I start to add a lot of extra shading just because I get very heavy-handed and I kind of just eat my highlight. So if I color everything out in the first layer and just am very minimal with my shading, it typically helps me to keep a lighter card so that I do have a highlight and I'm not super disappointed with the way that things look. I missed this little section of chair, so I had to go back in and get it. It's really going to be pretty dark because of just the location it is. So just going right over those other areas, like if it has the puckering and the shading calls for it, I'm just coloring right over it because that's how it's going to look like natural. So I'm going back in with the lightest color and I'm just filling everything kind of back in. If you find when you do this that it lifts up too much of your dark, which I did find that, you can just go back in with your darkest color and re-add, you know, not the full shading, but just a little bit of shading that's going to set that apart. I picked out a couple of grays because I'm cheating here a little bit. So I knew I wanted her socks to be striped 2 different colors, but I knew I wanted one of those colors to be white. So I'm doing all of the shading with my grays. I am adding all of the shading pretty much from the left-hand side and then a little bit underneath where her pants will be. And then I'm just, you know, blending that out. And this is going to shade my white, but then I will be able to go back in with another color and just fill in that section. and it'll look like it was all shaded even though I didn't pull out, you know, 4 colors to shade that secondary color. I'm also doing her top white. The only thing really to note here, for the darkest color, I'm adding minimal amounts because I want it to look white, but I am doing that little line where the crook of her elbow would be, and that's going to help it, again, look more realistic, more dimensional. So I picked the VO4 to fill in her little stripes. I wanted to bring in some more of that purple. A lot of times when you hear people talk about design rules, which you don't always have to follow, by the way, but one of the ways that you can help yourself until you get more comfortable, especially if you're a new card maker, is to follow some of these design rules. And one of them is to work in threes. So I had the purple wall, and I had her little purple socks, and then by the end of it, her blanket will be purple as well. So I'll have 3 items that are purple. I chose these navies. I told you I like navy and purple together. You should have saw it coming. I chose them to do her pants, and then also this book. For the book, I filled it in with the lightest color, except for the little accent, like the 2 little accent pieces on the spine of the book. But other than that, I'm going to fill it in completely. And now to make this dimensional, I want the spine to be lighter than the rest of the book. So I'm going to add my shading coming out from the center, and I'm leaving the right-hand side lighter because, again, that's where my light source is. So this is going to be a little bit darker on the left-hand side. I only used 3 colors for this one. Oh, I'm also adding a shadow underneath her hand because that would make sense. But really just trying to make sure that I keep my dark next to the spine of that book. That's what's going to help it pop out. And then leave a lighter edge on it. So that way it looks like it's sticking out from the rest of the book. Once I am done with that, we're going to move on to the blanket. This is, so I told you I colored it purple, and I did. I colored it purple. But then it turned out to be a little bit too much purple. So I'm going to fill the whole thing in with my lightest color. There wasn't, for this card, like there wasn't anything like, I really left a white highlight on, except her shirt because I colored it white, so that made sense. Most of them I just, you know, filled in with the colors completely. So for this blanket, there's going to be shading where that cute little kitty's sitting in her lap. There's a couple of other little lines that are drawn into this blanket that will have shading, and then I added kind of my own lines where I thought the blanket would kind of be pulled or stretched. I ended up adding too many lines. I didn't like it. But you know me, I'm not starting over again, especially not now. I mean, we're like 2 steps away from being done with this. But I will show you how I kind of got around that. Because at this point, I don't know I don't like it. I knew I didn't like it when it was over. So working out to that darkest color, adding very minimal amounts to just the parts that will be the darkest, just a little line of it. The VO9 is very, it's a very strong dark color, but strong dark colors is what gives you dimension. That's, I mean, if you want your 1-layer cards to look dimensional, you got to bite the bullet. And I know that it's scary because it was scary for me for a long time. But just try it. Not on something like this where you're invested in, unless you're feeling a little crazy, and then I support you in that endeavor. But, you know, just stamp something out and color it, and then try it. Try adding in that dark. You don't have to be heavy-handed with it. A little bit goes a long way. So at this point, I've colored the whole thing. I'm going to go over it again with my lightest color, which is that VO1. Just going to fill everything in, and this is the point where I was like, I don't really like those lines. I don't like the blanket lines. So I decided I was going to go in, and this is actually the B93 that I used, the navy, and I'm just going to once over it. First of all, we're hiding those lines. That's what we're definitely doing here with the white dots. But second of all, I needed it to be slightly different because it blended so much into the wall that I couldn't really, like, it just didn't feel like it was anything that was different. So one of the things that I like to do after I do my white gel pen is I like to go back in with a medium color and just kind of add that back in around the shadow areas, because you're not supposed to, they say you're not supposed to do it because it can ruin your nibs, but do that at your own risk. I've never had an issue. So I like to outline everything because I like a bold black outline. So I did all of that. And then I'm just putting it back in my MISTI to go ahead and stamp my sentiment, which is part of the same set. You've seen me use this trick before where I use my sequins as kind of placeholders so I know where I want to put my Nuvo drops. So I went ahead and did that, and then the last thing I'm going to do is add some clear Wink of Stella. You probably can't see it, but the title of the book says Newton the Cat. I thought that was cute, and I wanted to fill in that area. So that's the whole card. Thank you guys so much for joining me, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.